Tyranno Ex. This is, it's a kind of interesting game. For a light game. Not as short as maybe some players would like nowadays. But for my era, this was a good kind of end of night game. You know, after you play a couple of 6-8 hour games, if you're still up for anything, something like this would be cool. One disadvantage to it, of course, is it's got this huge box, which made it difficult to transport. So unless you were at somebody's house who had it, it was unlikely to make it. You know, I mean, people aren't going to throw a box that size in as a filler type game or as an end of night type game. So usually a deck of cards or a game of Naval War or whatever would be more likely. But this actually serves very well in that circumstance, other than being way too big. And the main reason it's big, well, other than that they put a lot of empty space in the box, because they really did, it's all filler, just is this big old board. Now, an extra fold in it would have worked, but Avalon Hill in this era I don't think knew how to make good boards. They certainly didn't earlier. So this is more your Monopoly size style board with the, without cloth, but with a fold over and whatever. Other components, the counters are a little thin and flimsy. You could see, so I had to clip my circles because I have to clip everything, and you can see they got kind of messed up by it pretty easily. But that's not too uncommon. The others are, you know, they're fairly standard quality for Avalon Hill. The cards, on the other hand, are a little cheap. Yeah, kind of like Blackbeard's and some other Avalon Hill. Better than, you know, your SPI type cards that you ripped off a sheet of paper, as it were. But these are not poker quality. They shuffle fine, and it's not really a big deal. Little bits of card stock, I mean, what can you say? So, the rules are well written, simple. I wish they didn't fold out, but, you know, something this size, who cares? Easy enough to follow. The optional rules, the dominant species one seems fine. I'm a little weird on the King of the Carnosaurs one. I've never even played that. I play with the dominant species one fairly often. It hides a critter, so you're sitting there saying, do I want a critter for 2 points that I don't know what abilities it has, or do I want one that I know I can support and keep alive? I'd rather have the information open. There's enough guessing in this game already. So, that's one of the big possible complaints about it, is the memory aspect of it. I know some people really dislike, because there's non-hidden information, open information as to what was in one of these at some point, and then it disappears, and you've got to spend your time trying to remember. For me, that's a fun aspect of the game, but not solitaire. It doesn't convey well to a solitaire game. I can't remember what I put in something. I can't remember where I'm going. But I have to say, when I've played the game opposed, I have those same kind of brain farts, and it makes it kind of fun. If you don't like that, well, there are things you could do against it. You could leave open information face up all the time. That would help tremendously. You could also even stack people's pieces with their color on it so they could look and see what they've played, so that their own information is available to them. But honestly, you know, that mechanism is actually what the game is about. And being able to precisely calculate it and not rely on fuzzy memory would probably slow the game down a little bit. What about the scoring mechanism? This is intriguing to me, because you have this situation where you're moving down the chart and things are getting more and more valuable. The more people on your column, the less valuable that column is. So you want to pick things off on the column that you're in. But other people are trying to pick you off on their columns. So you often end up with just 1 or 2 creatures in any given column. And then when you get to here, you want to prevent anybody from pushing, except yourself, because then you get more points, from pushing you further up. And finally, when you get here, you really have to worry that somebody's going to push you off the board completely and you won't score. Yeah, it goes this way. So, you got a couple of clever little things here. You have what obviously, like, the reason I did this was because of dominant species. The environmental chits from this are almost lifted into dominant species. However, this really cute and clever mechanism that is what to me makes this game, that guesswork bit of it, that's gone. But that's okay, because what I always saw these as was kind of... So the old game Quirks has this chart that just moves you through different terrain types. Oh, look, you're in the jungle now. Now you're in the desert. And all the critters are fixed by their value as to where they're in the desert, in the environments. These little chits allow the players to kind of control that environmental change to their own advantage. Now, it's not a simulation of anything, and to tell you the truth, this whole game is as abstract and untied to real evolutionary, story as Dominant Species is. Little difference here, though, is what happens here is believable, right? It's at an even more abstract level, and Dominant Species makes certain things specific that it just gets totally wrong. Like an ocean with no water, or whatever. This one doesn't seem to have any flaws like that, but it's just a game. It's an abstract game that has some thematic, topical, whatever, tie. I don't like thematic because, to me, theme is something that is less even than what this has. This, like Monopoly, has a topical tie. So I have like these differentiations of a word that all Eurogamers just throw in and say, oh, that's just theme. To me, theme is something that is just completely untied to the game. The Simpsons chess set. Yeah. Topical it's to borrow a word from somebody I was discussing, but a word that fits very nicely. It's evocative of the subject matter. Yeah. But finally, a simulation actually has a subject matter, a real subject matter, that it treats. It has a subject, not just a topic, not just a theme. The others, you kind of say, well, okay, what's the difference between topic and subject and theme? Yeah, okay. For me, it's the level of dignity that the game gives to its representation of that thing, the story, whatever. And in this game, I feel it's at the topical level. I also feel it's there in Dominant Species, but it fails worse at the topical level. And obviously, every game has an abstract underneath it. Could you re-theme this into something that was significantly different? I don't know, maybe. I mean, you could probably make something up, but to me, Dominant Species is clearly any kind of competitive situation. Makes sense. This it may as well. So there may be about an equivalent tie. This game does have some serious issues, though. For one thing, there's often a disincentive for going after the leader. Often the person you want to attack is the person who's got a possible weapon to hit you with. Or so you're protecting your own critters. Or it's someone who happens to just be sitting on your column. Now, great if that's the leader, but then you have to make this choice. Is it more important for me to hit the person who will give me more points, or is it more important for me to try to hurt the leader? And, there's this balancing calculation there. And that exists in a number of games. History of the World has it too. It actually makes it harder to catch up in this, though, by a significant factor. I've found that people run away with it fairly often. Also, once you start, like we saw in my game, once you start to play to prevent people from doing things, it becomes a lot easier to do that than to get what you want out there. So if you want to bone the world, as Yellow did, even though they were doing well, they might have been able to score, a record game. I remember when I used to play with my family, not this, but a lot of games, we used to worry about, who got the best score ever? Well, in this case, there might be strong incentives for not going for the best score ever, but trying to knock everybody down with you. Anyway, that's, I don't know if that's really a negative, but that could kind of, I know some people don't like a confrontational game, and this is definitely one where you're picking off other people's stuff, where you're directly trying to wipe their critters off the board. In a way that Dominant Species is not. You certainly are affecting other people a lot in Dominant Species, but in this, you're much more able to just say, yeah, I'm after you and I'm taking you down. The closest thing in Dominant Species is wiping out somebody's cube supply so that they can't have a board presence anymore. The mechanism for increasing strength based on the environment works nicely with it. Gives you lots of choices, because if you start playing, especially once you get to the later turns where you're getting two phases where you can't increase strength, and even the second phase where you have one. Once you're at the point where you can't increase strength on your last play, then you're making a choice. Do you play your important pieces that help your critters to up their strength, or do you save them for survivability at the end? And that's, there's always a balancing act there. What about dice in it? There's a ton of die rolling in it. It can be mechanically obnoxious, okay? If there was more die rolling, but you only get one attack each turn, and you get a lot of other things going on in between, none of which require much in the way of paying attention to calculations and such. You're not constantly counting to see if you survive. That's either obvious or can be ascertained pretty quickly, and it may not matter. It's something that's so fluid in terms of how the environments change. That may be a little weird. That's a little disconcerting, because you walk into it thinking, I've got this good critter because that's what the environment is. Hey, the environment's not going to stay. Not throughout any single turn. It's going to get blasted several times. And that's the point. When you go for your critter and try to up its strength, you're paying pieces that are useful to you in order to get that advantage. And now, unless you have a fantastic hand for that critter, chances are it's going to not have a lot of dice at the end. But going back to the dice, the mechanical annoyance. So if two players tie for the die roll, you roll again. So that could happen quite a bit. So for example, critters with not a lot of strength and not a lot of dice, say you're rolling one die for a 1, you'll be rolling against each other for a while. Finally somebody gets a success. Well, that's still not enough. You got to keep rolling until somebody gets another success. And you've got to keep rolling until somebody has gotten 2 successes, which could take a lot of different face-offs. And the same can happen actually because of the bell curve nature of things, etc. Yeah, that doesn't really apply here. But because of when you're rolling multiple dice, you do get something of a bell curve as to the number of any given number that you're producing. So you have a certain expected value of how many 6s you're going to get, or in this game, how many 1s and 2s you're going to get. It just ends up tying a significantly large number of times just because of the way the distributions fall. And I don't like annoying systems that require me to do a lot of mechanical stuff to get something that I feel like it could have been put in a single little simple CRT. Now, I understand there's a certain joy, even for me, to grabbing a fistful of dice and rolling them and counting up the hits or whatever. But I don't want to have to do it more than once per critter. And the way this system works, very simple, clear design, but in the worst case, you could be rolling forever because you never get a hit. Neither guy gets a hit. So it's theoretically possible for the die rolls to go on for a very long time. The fact that I had one set of big dice going 5 times, that was probably the worst I saw in the game, and that's probably about the limit of what you'd see. But it's still very annoying to me to have that many die rolls, especially where there's multiple dice, especially if I don't have enough of the proper dice in my hand. And the game came with like 4 dice. I have a humongous quantity, so that shouldn't be an issue for me, except for the size of my hands. Let's see. So there are a lot of interesting decisions that you're faced with in this game, though. And that's why, if you look at it nowadays, the players of this time, and this really came out right about the time when the Euros were first making it over to America. I think maybe before Settlers did. But this shows, and it was written by a German, I believe. It shows a certain early Euro design type flavor. Yeah. This kind of simplified game, nicely topical, neither thematic nor subject oriented, nicely topical, without a huge burden on the players, uses randomness and all the risk manipulation and mitigation type strategies that come along with it to make it a more interesting game. You don't know you're going to kill that critter. You just know you have better odds at it. And I like games like that because you can play this thing almost entirely on feel. The only thing that takes effort in the whole game, not thought, the only thing that takes effort is trying to remember what you should know that's down here. And honestly, that can be very frustrating. I know quite a few times I said, oh, shit, But it can also be really funny when you screw up. It's not a terribly long game, but it's not a short game by today's standards. And anyway, this pleased me in a lot of ways as sort of the best of the games of this type, in terms of like this evolutionary type game. Quirks is just a failure, but a beautiful one. It's the awesome animals, and I wanted to combine it with this. Dominant Species, obviously people love it, but I find it almost intolerable. American Megafauna is fun. It's probably close to the amount of effort that's in Dominant Species, but it treats the whole thing as a serious topic, as a serious subject. There I go, going off my script there. Yeah, like I have a script. But yeah, this one has this kind of nice feel in terms of mixing that game with the thought decisions, with the simplicity. It all works for me. You're not going to have the kind of decisions that you agonize over in Dominant Species. You can make all these decisions straight from your gut, or you could, if you're really crazy, perform a rigorous analysis on the probabilities of, something happening, of a person having certain shits in their hand and this, that, and the other if you really wanted to. But there's no point to that. That's not the kind of game that this is. So, yeah, I had significant fun with this as that filler sort of game. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Don't know what I'm doing next, but with the weekend coming up, I don't think it's going to be another flying color scenario. I am, and was before I put this up, I only did this because of dominant species. I am leaning towards something a little bigger, but singular, so that like we're not looking at like a set of musket and pike battles that I'll like try to interleave with flying colors. Anyway, up she goes.